Hi, my name is Jamie and I manage creative projects at the Museum of Youth Culture. I'm welcoming you here to our digital version of our exhibition How We Were, which is an exhibition by Shirley Baker and curated by Debbie Sears.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm the archive manager here at the Museum of Youth Culture, and we're here in front of a contact sheet of one of the first series of work that we took on by Shirley Baker, her work documenting the punk scene in Manchester. And it's really some of her later work shot in the 80s, but it really captures the essence of her photography.
Hi, my name's Debbie Sears. I'm the curator of this exhibition of How We Were by Shirley Baker. It was a dream come true for me to do this exhibition, and my background is in black and white printing, which I began in the mid-70s as an apprentice. The curation shows a journey from childhood through to adulthood in the town of Salford in Manchester. It's special to me in a way because for me it's pure photography. It's shot by a woman, and B, the fact that she printed them all herself. So they're all vintage photographs, and they're just beautiful. Just beautiful tones, beautiful framing. She just seems to have managed to capture just wonderful expressions.
And that's her real kind of power to be able to document people and kind of capture those really intimate moments, but also those little kind of different personalities of people that she's probably met for the first time.
It's been the first time we've shown photographs that really go back from the sort of 1950s and 60s, but also showing photographs in a time where we're in the middle of a pandemic as well.
Doing a lot of work processing all the amazing submissions we've had through our Grown Up in Britain campaign, and then coming to Shirley Baker's work, I was really able to see how these quite different types of photography, the kind of everyday snapshots next to, professional photographers' work, how together they really start telling an amazing story about youth culture in the UK and beyond, and really seeing how together they're going to help us form the basis of the Museum of Youth Culture and tell that history, which is really exciting to see.
The whole idea of running this exhibition was just to look at the way that people were before this sort of pandemic hit, and the way that sanitisation happened in London both prior to the pandemic, but also in the middle of in the sort of physical sense that we're going through right now. We've been collecting photography since 1997, and the photography goes back to the 1960s, 1950s, but even more now it goes back to 100 years, so we've started to receive images that go back to the 1920s. So looking at that sort of more traditional black and white photographic world is something that's new to us. And I think even just the process that we took to put this exhibition together was really different, because normally we put an exhibition together that might include a few different youth culture scenes. It might include the rave scene, it might include some rock and roll fans, it might include some two-tone, but this has been the first time we've got one collection of images that we're showing on their own and actually curating in a way that is traditional, and they are hung in a white gallery space, which we've been very lucky to have access to. It's been a real privilege for us to actually work as an emerging museum with such a traditional and sort of well-regarded collection of photographs.
The wonders of Google now have made it possible to keep searching beyond the immediate physical archives that we have access to. And it was through really my persistence of searching online that I eventually found a trace of an exhibition that had been 11 years previously at the Lowry in Salford in Greater Manchester, which had been an exhibition of a woman called Shirley Baker. And from the description and from the images that were online, it fitted what I was looking for: a northern woman photographer photographing out in the streets, working class communities in the late 50s, early 1960s. And so I contacted the Lowry and asked them who was Shirley Baker and could she possibly still be alive. And really, to my delight, she was. And she was living actually not far from Manchester. And so I made contact with her, and I included quite a number of her photographs in that exhibition, Saturday night and Sunday morning, that was at the Ginogly Gallery in Nottingham. The problem was for me that when I went to meet Shirley in her home, there was so much interesting work that I knew that in a big group show, and this was a very big exhibition, but I knew I was never going to be able to show many of her photographs. At most, I think I showed 20, 25. So I really promised Shirley there and then that I would come back to her and that I would develop both an exhibition project and actually also a publication. Whilst in a way one could almost say the heyday of her work was the 60s. In the 1960s itself, very, very few people knew about her work. She didn't exhibit it because there were not the places in Britain to exhibit photography in the 1960s. Photography was not considered to be an art form. So there were not galleries queuing up for photography exhibitions. So really her options were only that of being either a news reporter or a photojournalist, really in the 1960s, or a studio photographer. She hated studio photography and didn't want that to become her career. And she ended up really working in industry as an industrial photographer, working for big companies, but she hated that as well. And she never made it into photojournalism, partly, I think, because of a prejudice against women photographers at the time. And actually also because in many ways, she didn't want to work to somebody else's brief. She really didn't want to be tied to what was the news of the day, which is what a news photographer did, and to a great extent what a photojournalist did. She wanted to be free to do her own thing. So actually she didn't circulate in the 1960s in the right context for really her work to be very exposed. And it took much later, really the mid-1980s, before she showed somebody the work, and that was Audrey Linkman at what was then called a documentary photography project in Manchester. That style of what we might call humanist photography had become deeply unfashionable. And so really curators of photography, once again, were not really interested in that type of photography. So when I included her in my exhibition, I really felt that it was time to take another look at her work and to try and get a photography gallery interested in her work. And that didn't prove to be easy at all. I think what was actually quite remarkable was the reticence to show me actually the extent of her work. When I first met her in 2011, she only showed me really a fraction of even what now become known as the Salford and Manchester Street series. And then in fact, when she died and I went back to her house and subsequently started very quickly after she died to really unearth the full range of work, it was extraordinary what she'd never talked to me about, or indeed it was quite extraordinary what she'd never really shown anybody very much, because the attention had all gone on to this body of work about Salford and Manchester. And what she'd never really revealed was that there were hundreds and hundreds of photographs that were not to do with those subjects at all, that were photographed in different places, different parts of the northwest of England, Blackpool, actually different parts of, in fact, Europe, the south of France, and indeed actually photographs that she'd taken much later in her life in Japan. Actually, I think that what we're beginning to see in Britain is a return to understanding documentary photography. And as I say, a sort of an expansion really of the way we might want to talk and think about this work, this kind of work. one of the things that I'm very keen is we can use Shirley Baker's work certainly to reveal what has happened in the historical past, how we were, which is the title of your exhibition. But I'm really keen to actually use this kind of work to look at how we are. And in that sense, what I'm really interested in is how we can take work from the historical past, but rather than treat these photographs as evidence of the historical past, we use them productively in the present moment to ask questions about the kind of world, the sort of society, the culture in which we live in now, and what we might like for the future. One of the things I think is very interesting about Shirley Baker's work is that in many ways what she does is she evidences what we could call intangible heritage. Things that actually are not objects, that can't be collected. You know, what did people look like? What games did children play in the street? How did women work in the street? What kind of visuality did a street have? These are intangible heritage. And in many ways, Shirley Baker's photographs fix that for us. They become in many ways, you know, the evidence of these things.
As part of my work at the museum, I do a lot of work with local community groups and history archives, often that have been relatively unseen or maybe not even digitized. And just seeing incredible work come through that, like Shirley's, really documents a time and a place and, you know, a way that Britain was, that tells so much about our social history and who we are as people. And if there's anything we've learned from Shirley Baker's work, which was only recently rediscovered, or the 59 Club archive that lay unseen for decades, is that there's these photographic archives out there all over the country that haven't been brought out or brought to light because maybe youth culture isn't seen as quite as important as other forms of culture or other forms of our history.
We've been running as a sort of London-centric collection for quite a long time, and a lot of our work, which has been funded by the National Lottery and also the Arts Council, has been all around sort of challenging what we do have and growing the archive so it's even more inclusive, and it covers all sorts of corners of youth culture across the UK by people that might not even consider themselves photographers. So launching How We Were is a sort of fitting link with the Grown Up in Britain project, because we're looking back at the past and we want to see what it was like for people to grow up. And I think, you know, if anyone has one image, if you know you're watching this and you have a picture of yourself growing up, we'd love you to be able to contribute that to our museum as well. And that's really easily done by accessing our website at museumofyouthculture.com.